GM, GA, GE, wherever you may be. Today we have the Lucky Trader Lounge. We'll be talking about the goblins that are all over Twitter right now. Are they saving NFTs? We'll discuss. Tyler, it's 3 days later now, and everyone's still talking about these goblins. So figured throw it on the thumbnail today. It's pretty much the leader in volume. Like there's all these derivatives coming out. Yesterday, the play was basically if any new project popped up that was a free mint and it had Goblin in the name, just blindly buy it and then sell it for 2x like an hour later. They had this 3-hour long Twitter Spaces, which had over 2,000 people listening in. Someone gave me a stat that said there was over 25,000 individual unique listeners, like at least listened for 5 seconds or whatever.
Wow.
So, how's the week of NFTs been for you? Because for me, it's been all goblins.
It's been a rough week. This is one of the toughest that I can remember. Just no volume, no action, slow bleeding, and then crypto dipped hard this morning. It's rebounded a little bit, but sentiment's bad. Like that is clear.
Yeah,
it's not a fun time to be in the market and looking at the screens every day. That's a fact. It's a good time to be bored and a good time to be someone who's got other things to do and going outside.
Yeah, it's sort of just that other article that Logan always posts about it, the medium board idea. It's a good time to get outside. Don't just sit at your screen watching charts all day because you'll just get sadder and sadder as you do that. Go, take a walk outside. Go for a little jog or something because it's nicer weather now too. So it's not like you're going outside when it's snowing or anything. So let's look at the charts that we have, some project rankings, the leaders. It's still every day it seems like Other Deeds still leads in volume, which is kind of wild to me that even basically a month after they launched, they're still sucking up all that liquidity. But what do you see on this chart outside of, as I already mentioned, the goblins, but anything pop out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, the goblins are the headline. That's a fact. Other than that, I think there's a couple of headlines. Volume is down significantly, right, across the blue chips and the top end sets. Other Deeds is the number one at 10,000 ETH. It's down 30%. Bored Apes down 55%. Mutant Apes down 37% volume wise. Clone X down 50%. Moonbird's 50%. Azuki's 80%. Granted, they were a bit of an outlier last week. So volume has just been cut in half. That's what we get from this board. And then the floors have been dipping in line with that. I think, we've started to see a little bit more of the pain trickle in this week. We kind of talked about how the floors have been holding up. I still would say they are holding up decently given this drastic reduction in liquidity, which is still good. But I can't sugarcoat it too much. I mean, things are down. Other Deeds is down 10%. The Apes 7%. Mutants 5%. Clone X has held up the best, just down 2%. So that might be a signal to pay attention to right there. Mm-hmm. And then Moonbird's down 19%. We kind of talking Monday about how they'd held up after the oddities drop. And we thought there would be a rush of folks to, potentially list after getting the bronze nest. Turns out they just waited a few days. Yeah. And now we've started to see that dip.
Another point on the Moonbirds, and I'm not sure if this is another take that you might have on it, but I've been watching Moonbirds more than you this week, which is a little different than most weeks. But there was a hack for about 30 Moonbirds, and it's funny because a lot of the Proof and Moonbird community kind of came together as the FBI trying to find the hacker who stole, it was over $1 million worth of assets from someone who I think they self-proclaimed said they are relatively new to NFTs, and Moonbirds was one of their big, like, I mean, they had 29 Moonbirds. How new could they be, right? Was my thought. But anyway, a lot of the floor Moonbirds got listed from that hack steal on
Okay.
LooksRare. I'm not sure how much of that takes into account. It was the floor was like 24. They were listing those at 23, but they couldn't list on OpenSea. It There hasn't been too much buy volume. I mean, as you see here, it says over the past week, 69 buys, nice over the week, which that's only about 10 a day.
Yeah.
And as we know, like with the way that the current market is, there are people that are trying to get out with $40,000 or more from the Moonbirds. They got it, the Bronze Nest, they got their oddities back. So I think there's a couple different factors there. But yeah, as mentioned, like the first couple days, no one was listing. Now, when it's a few more days out and there's not as many buys happening, it seems like people start listing them again.
Yeah, I don't really understand the move, and of course, I'm a bit biased as a Moonbird holder. We just had a side project airdrop that immediately was came out of the gate at 4 ETH, fell to 3 ETH, but has held essentially. The oddies have held up at 3 ETH, which I think is a pretty solid floor, or they're at 2.8 according to the board, but still kind of right around the 3 ETH range. The first airdrop 1 month in, it's already free 3 ETH per holders. Unless you're selling to try to either you're super bearish on NFTs as an entire asset class, or you think the Moonbirds are too high and they're going to dip hard, and you'll have a better shot to rebuy. Maybe that's the logic, but also again, it's just a few actors, right? There's 109 birds listed right now. Like that's nothing compared
Yeah.
to the other collections. So any buy pressure and they'll go up, but another thing to watch is there really hasn't been much buy pressure.
Right.
So we're
Yeah,
gonna need that
because
to come at some point.
if someone, and it's hard to just say this, but if someone comes in and sweeps 10 of them, like 10, that's a lot of ETH to go through around, but there might be people that have been waiting for an opportunity like this to maybe buy the second that Moonbirds get under 20 ETH, they're going to buy, sort of like what we see with crypto coins in general, where people have target prices that they want to buy when it gets there, no matter what the sort of environment is at the time. So, I mean, I'm someone that has been looking to make a play at Moonbirds. Currently, the other side of it, as even though it says the top volume for other deeds, the floor has been dipping. It was at around 3.2 last week, and now it's at 2.8. It does have a ton of volume, but there isn't as much volume on Coda side. And ahead of last week, people thought there was going to be more news on Codas. Codas have been trickling in price, and there's just this is another market I've been following. There hasn't been too much buy pressure there. There have been rare Coda buys. I saw there was a 180 ETH buy of a non-Coda piece of land.
Wow.
That I think it was the rarest environment.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where these top tier projects are slowly bleeding. I think we can say at this point.
Mhm.
It's not like as crazy of a dip as some of those other mid tiers, but what's your thoughts in general, just as far as a couple weeks ago, it was blue chip meta, everyone's buying into blue chips. Now we see the chart has way less volume. A lot
Mhm.
of that can be attributed to there's just less volume on these blue chip items. Do you think it's because they're currently maybe overpriced?
That's part of it. I think we always like to relate to past cycles, bull and bear. I mean, this reminds me a lot of like the November bear market cycle that we had last year. Volume dried up quite a bit. There wasn't really much action on. That was when we were kind of in between art blocks, meta, and PFPs were starting to pick up. This was before like Fallon got his ape, and those really took off. But what happens in like the really quiet times, in the really low volume days, is you see more of the junk, the derivatives, those products spin up. The people are just purely trying to, musical chairs, hot potato play to, get in and get out as fast as they can. So I think we just have to be aware of that. And if you want to trade this environment, just be conscious of kind of what the environment is. And it's a lot of hot potato. It's a lot of products that will absolutely go to zero at some point. So if you're going to get in, have an exit plan, I guess. But Goblin Town, maybe they buck the trend. Who knows?
So let's get into that a little bit because we keep comparing this to MFers from the last time we went from a little bit of a bear back into bull, where it was this sort of people came together to this one NFT that was kind of a joke, and then they made it into a thing. There's a few differences here. It's obviously not the same type of thing. The artwork itself, it's hard because I could say this a few different ways, but one thing is the artwork itself, like they're supposed to not look good. That's like kind of part of it. A difference between this and MFers. MFers like all look the same, but they were different colors or they had a couple different traits, but the base of it was pretty much the same. So you knew right away that it was an MFer. Here, you could still kind of know right away that it's a goblin. The artwork is just kind of all over the place. And then they had the spaces yesterday where everyone's talking in goblin speak. And it was just like ridiculous. But we have found in the past that following these sort of cult communities, it creates a stronger community. When I was following this yesterday, they didn't even get up to 10% listed. Like people are holding these and not really listing them the same way. It's almost 50% holder percentage out of the total. And just in general, what's your thoughts here? Because going into yesterday, floor was at about 0.8 or so. Now it's in 1 ETH above that. I think it peaked around 2.4, 2.3 maybe last night. But what's your thoughts on goblins? Do you think they're here to stay?
I think it's a little too early to say if they're here to stay or not. I think last night's Spaces was epic. Love it or hate it, like it drew a ton of attention to this project. And one rule that is a hard, steadfast rule in NFTs is attention and hype is what matters, especially for these newer projects. You talked about the similarities to MFers. I just keep coming back to that. It feels just so similar in so many ways. And like the price action has accelerated much faster than MFers did. But I think that also speaks to this. We're in a faster market now. Like Moonbirds went from 2.5 ETH mint to 40 ETH in a week. Right. That types of hype cycles has never really happened before. So I feel like we kind of condensed the entire MFR first 2 to 3 month cycle into like this week. Now the question is, are they going to be here to stay and actually kind of rally around this meme at least long enough to have some staying power? And if folks who may not be familiar with the MFR's project from Satoshi, it was, I want to say like a 0.1 to maybe 0.2 with gas, because it was definitely a gas war. Back last December, it traded under mint and then kind of caught fire. I want to say like the January, February timeframe.
Yeah, because a lot of people did the tax loss harvesting with it.
That's right. So like it fell below mint. It was quiet for a decent period of time. It rallied all the way to 5, and then we've got a comment here from Chicago Spartan that the MFR's floor is 1.27. So it's down 70-80% from its all-time high. So they got past 5 at some point. And I think that one of the challenges with these meme projects is at some point the meme kind of dies off a little bit. And like you don't see the NFers meme nearly as much. You don't see the PFPs nearly as much as you used to. Some people are still rocking. I think DC Investor is still rocking his. So like that's what goblins are going to face. And if they can do enough of these goblin spaces for the next month and people like them, who knows? Like I'm not gonna I'm not ready to short these. Like, that's a
Right.
fact. At least not on a near term timeline. So
Yeah.
who knows? That's kind of my stream of conscious thoughts on these. I don't own any. I'm certainly not buying in at this price point. But kudos to anyone who got in early. It's been a heck of a trade.
Yeah, I think part of it is like people on Twitter are sort of posting, "Oh, this is the type of thing I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to 5/8 floor." And I don't. I think just current environment is going to limit the ceiling here. I don't think we see this rush to 7 like MFers did, but I also think they'll stay above 1 for a little bit here. Chicago was talking about the Yuga rumor that helped early on, and so this was something I was discussing um, earlier today, actually. But there's sort of thresholds, I think,
Mm-hmm.
that create different levels of confidence for a new buyer. And I think they've broken the 2 ETH threshold that I think for them to go back under 1 is going to take a little bit because people saw that movement. What if they start a spaces again? And what if they mention they're going to drop something? Or there's this AI goblins that are going to come out in like 45 minutes that could be a rush to buy, and people are going to have potentially a gas war. Like they are currently in their own hype cycle right now. I agree with you on the don't short them right now. It depends on how long of a horizon, right? But I would say the next week or two, they should still hold up and be like the face right now
Yeah,
of like what people are focusing on because there's not really much else that's coming out that's new. And we know people like to focus on the new stuff.
I think that's the biggest factor in their favor right now is none of the big collections are doing anything, dropping anything in the next few weeks,
Yeah.
at least that we know about. There really are no new mints on the horizon. Like I was looking at this weekend. This weekend is zilch.
Yeah.
There's nothing really big on my radar for the next few weeks. So they've got a ton of runway. I think kind of tying back to the Yuga rumor, you talked about how that was early, but there's as we think about free mints, I think there's this concept of like an escape velocity where you have to get past a certain point
Mm-hmm.
to get the early collectors, buyers confidence levels. And it's probably like 0.15 to 0.2. Below the 0.1 range, it's like it can go back to zero so fast. It's kind of hard, to put a ton in. Of course, the ROI is better at those levels, but the Yuga rumor helped them get past there. And then it got to like 0.5. And like, okay, people are starting to take it a little bit more seriously.
Right.
And then I still haven't fully wrapped my head around how it went from 0.5 to 2 ETH quite so fast.
Yeah.
But
And people don't want to ditch it, as you mentioned, like if you bought in at 0.08, you're more likely to sell it at 0.03 when it starts dipping than if you got in at 0.8, you're more likely to hold it when it gets down to 0.5 because you're like, oh, it's been up here. And that's sort of what we saw is like it went up to around 0.7 or so, and then it dipped back down to like half of that, and then started moving up a little more slowly. And once people's entry point is higher, I think their sense of, well, I don't want to lose, $1,000 is a lot different than $50. So I think that's where like the 0.1 is the big threshold at the beginning that these free mints like have to get over, in my opinion. We saw it with those like AI moonbirds yesterday, did something similar. Like they were sitting at 0.05, but once they broke 0.1, then they could get to 0.2. So there's just like weird things like that. They started somewhat of another set of derivatives of these like AI things. So let's go back to sort of other stuff that's coming out because Boki is another project that had somewhat of a bullish reveal. I think it was under zero point 0.2 before the reveal. I think it was around 0.1 to 0.15 for a little bit. It ran up to 0.4, 0.4 plus. So they revealed, and people seemed to like the art. What's your thoughts on Boki? Because this is a separate project outside of Goblin that still was one of the bigger winners on the week.
Yeah, they've been a huge win. A friend in the Discord brought this to our attention when it was like 0.11, 0.12 just a few days ago. Yeah, we see here in the activity chart, just on the 22nd, average price was 0.13, on the 24th, 0.17. And then, yeah, it sure seems like folks like the reveal. It was zero point 0.5 when I checked first thing this morning,
Yeah.
around 6 Eastern. Um, I don't have a great read on this one. I haven't done a deep dive on it. We were chatting on before the show. For whatever reason, I'm getting a huge Woody's vibe off this. And I don't know why, if it's the eyes or what, but it's got the pastel colors. Um, I don't know exactly what's driving the price action yet, so
Yeah.
kind of tough to say whether this one's going to have staying power or not. But certainly, some people seem to like it.
Yeah, I think one thing that this one has, that the guy from Starcatchers, that he went off and started his own project. So maybe you're thinking of Starcatchers on the style of it. But some of these, like the one of ones, look pretty good. It's one of those projects where the floors are kind of meh. So I could see that hurting it from a variant standpoint. But yeah, this was another one that people were sweeping kind of like crazy yesterday, after they revealed. Um,
It's hard to look at these one of ones though and not get a lot of doodles vibes. Well, so this is
like they
Starcatchers
take a
right
lot
here.
of similar.
This is like literally Starcatchers.
Mhm.
But like the banana, similar to the pickle. It's also got the ape, which is similar to what the doodle ape looks like. They've got the cat as one of ones, kind of like the fire backgrounds. I don't know. This now, kind of looking through these, I actually hadn't looked at these before. Uh, I'm seeing a lot of similarities to some other projects here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't notice that, but when you mentioned it, like, yeah, you could use any animals, but you're using the same animals that another project used. That is kind of interesting. But I don't know. This isn't one. I don't think this one's much for me. I've always kind of stayed away from it. Ever since I heard it was that guy that basically just ditched the Starcatchers to do his own thing, like
Mm-hmm.
right after doing Starcatchers 2. Like it was very quickly after. So I've been kind of off of investing into it just because I'm not like a fan of that sort of action in a way. But this one had that bullish reveal, and then to me, we don't have a date yet, but I think it shows for something like Wreck Guy, which is currently in the pre-reveal stage, that we could see Wreck Guy being one that has a bullish reveal, similar to what we were just saying about Goblin Town. Is there's not really much else for people to go into right now, and this one has an artist that is known, the OSF Mando backing to it. I think they have a decent setup from that, and they have over 50% as far as the holder count right now. You had mentioned there's more of these to be released though, or are they going to cut off supply if they don't get minted out?
Yeah, so this is important for anyone who's paying attention to this project. So Rex Guy was originally going to be 11,000 NFTs. The mint window only goes till Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, and they're going to cut the supply with whatever gets minted.
Okay.
And the read that OSF and Mando have on this is basically that everyone who's going to mint has already. So we're at 8,600 right now. So we'll be surprised if there's over 9,000 of these before it ends tomorrow. At this point, there wouldn't be a whole lot of advantage to waiting much longer, and potentially missing your mint for something that's free mint and holding a 0.38. So I think most people,
Yeah.
anyone who just wanted the mint to sell, has probably already gone through and done that. Of course, it's going to be really volatile after the reveal. We don't know when the reveal is. Um, I'm selfishly hoping it's this weekend, just because we've seen how if one collection can kind of catch the market's attention on the weekend, they can kind of dominate the headlines and run a bit. And given that there's really nothing else, anything that catches that momentum is going to be able to maintain it, in my opinion, through the weekend. So this one's got a shot. Uh, on Monday, we were talking about, or I was talking about, is this going to be the next MFers? Certainly, Goblin Town has a huge lead now. So Rex Guy has got some work to do to catch up. But I'm definitely interested to see how the market's going to react to these reveals.
Yeah, I think this one is set up to be in a little better position than others. I kind of hope it's not too much. Right now, it's hard to just physically look at this page because of all the blinking. But it does look like art-wise, it's going to be different than a lot of other stuff that we see and that we're used to. One thing we always sort of talk about is it something that you can actually use as your avatar on Discord, Twitter, and right now, I think it might be one of those too zoomed out looking. If just the way that he's holding the drink back, like I could see it potentially not looking all that great in like a PFP format, but that's one to look for. As mentioned, like we still aren't sure if it's going to come out this weekend. Like I could see the argument for it being a good time to do it versus not, like the fact that it would be the headliner of revealing if it were to do that, could be in its favor. So we'll see, but definitely one to watch, I'd say. And then one other thing that's been catching some news is these little nouns. So basically, similar, if you haven't heard of the nouns before, they are basically once a day, the nouns have an auction, and it's one noun NFT every day for ever, eternity. They are backed by a DAO. If the DAO were to decide to stop doing it at some point, that'll cut supply. There's how many of these?
322.
320. Yeah, so they've been doing this less than a year at this point, but they have pretty good floor. They've been pumping recently. I feel like the floor got to around 60. Like, do you remember how low it got?
Go lower.
Was it
Yeah.
40 recently?
I want to say, and I don't have the exacts here, but it was like, it got to like 40, 50. I don't know if it actually got to 30.
40 sounds right. Yeah. But
to
now
get
it's
the full
back
count.
over 100. It used to be pretty much every day one of these were selling for 100 in the auction, and during the big hype cycles, they always seem to be, because they are one of ones. And one thing that they have been showing more recently, this was Goblin, who when they're posting them now, they show like a 3D version of it, which is kind of cool and makes the actual artwork look that much better. It's obviously like pixelated art and their CCO, so a lot of these have been copied into other projects. But now this little nouns, what they're doing is once every 15 minutes, they're auctioning off a little noun. They're pretty much all going for around this 1.2 ETH, and the floor is around 1.4. And it's been holding up pretty consistently. They're already over 1,000 of these minted since they're doing, for every hour versus the other one that's one a day. So what's your thoughts here? Because I think that this is an interesting idea for potential drops of other projects. I saw D's talking about this. They have a treasury similar where all of the profit from these auctions are going into their DAO treasury. Already has over 800 ETH in there. Could see them deciding to stop these at a certain number. And if this is, say, only 5,000, 10,000 supply, if it doesn't go for a full year, if it only goes for a few months, like what's your thoughts on how they're doing this? Do you think other projects potentially are going to use this model to, say, mint out 10,000 in a project?
So I think it's really smart. I mean, it definitely alludes back to the nouns model. So there's a few factors why people buy into nouns. One, to me, I think it is the network. It's got some of the sharpest minds in crypto and NFT as owners of that collection. So I think that's a big driver. The CCO nature, I think a lot of people kind of consider it to be like one of the foundational CCO projects. And the noun glasses themselves are iconic. They've already made such a huge splash across the NFT space. And I think if you had to name like one single feature from any NFT set that's the most recognizable, I think noun glasses have to be top 3, if not top 1. And then another reason why people feel safer to invest is because when you buy in, the primary sale, the ETH is in the treasury. So it's not going to some founders who you don't know, who they might take the money and run. There's actually some backing behind all of these NFTs and the buys. And I don't know exactly what the DAO plans to use the funds for, but in theory, they could all vote to disband the DAO and just distribute the ETH, and then everyone would get something at a minimum back. So it's kind of a backboard or a backdrop, which I think helps a lot. It's helping Little Nouns too, in my opinion. Like I like that Little Nouns is using the similar treasury concept. I like seeing that ticker on the page that they've got 830 ETH in there right now. And I've been surprised by the demand, but I think it just shows that there are a lot of people who are interested in the Nouns products who are just simply priced out.
Yeah.
And here's your version to get into the Little Noun DAO and kind of do something similar for 180th the price.
I've been going for some of these. I submit the transaction. By the time I submit, someone's already outbid me. Like there's a lot of game theory here, because if there's a bid in the last minute, it resets a minute, that sort of thing. So it's actually slower than every 15 minutes in that sense. But what happens is like there'll be no one that throws money out there, and then there's like 3 minutes left, and all of a sudden 5 bids come in, and you have to bid, I don't know what it is, like 5% higher than the previous bid. And there's also some game theory with the fact that there's a collection that has a floor price. So people say, what's the floor right now? 1.23. So that person right now has this at 1.21. Why would you go above that? Because you have to go above floor to buy that. Like, why wouldn't you just buy the floor one? So it's kind of cool. The last one there, 1111. I wish I had saw that, because that would have been a fun one to watch and go through. Actually, I think if you go back in there and click the back above Lil.
Oh, here.
Oh
wow.
Oh, now DAO took that.
So they get every 11th for the first 5 years are going to Nouns DAO. That's for the
first 5 years. I would guess this doesn't go for 5 years. That's so much supply. I think when we were breaking it out, it's like over 30,000 a year.
Yeah. So let's talk about that briefly. So I think one of the biggest gripes or negatives against Nouns early on was, it's constant supply inflation. And I think that's the number one knock against Little Nouns too, right? Like we already see 1,000 of these. It's going to be 30,000 this year. Guess what? The Artifact Clone X ecosystem has like 80,000 NFTs in it. Bored Ape Yacht Club Yuga ecosystem right now has 140,000 NFTs across their 4 primary collection. If the demand's there, the market can support it. Like, that is a fact. So I'm actually not scared off because of the supply on these. And like you mentioned, the DAO can always get together and vote to change the inflation mechanics, make it every 30 minutes for year 2, maybe once an hour for year 3, right? So there's ways to control that. But it's fun. The auctions are fun too. I think DZ also commented on this. Like, is this a better style for new products to mint? Right. These little auctions. I just say I think they're super fun. I haven't won one yet. I've also participated in a few. They're hard to win.
They're hard. I'm telling you, I think the way to do it is you see one maybe you like, it's at, I don't know, 1 ETH floor or something, and you just, like what this last one did, you fire out a bid at 1.2 when the floor is 1.23. So like just under it, where if someone had to up it, they had to go over. I feel like that's the way you have to do it. If you find one you like, this one's kind of neat.
How's the arrow? I like the arrow on the shirt.
Yeah,
I would have been on this.
like you said, like I've looked at nouns before. I've always thought they were like a cool concept. It's kind of a different version of expanding your ecosystem. And to me, I think if I saw one that I really liked, like that donut one's kind of cool. Like if I saw one that I liked, this is a cheap way to get in. And who knows, maybe the supply doesn't even get to 10,000.
I mean, this top one sold for 20. Like that's wild.
Yeah.
But I think so. You mentioned the floor price, and that absolutely is a factor. But the reality is, this is the same in the nouns market. It's going to be the same in the little nouns. You know, if people like specific ones, if they're unique, they like the shape, what have you, they're fine to pay a premium.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's also that upside to these, and like you never know who might really like your noun, right? And who's willing to
Yeah.
pay for it. So like that's it's nice to see that there is somewhat of some liquidity in the collections. I think that's been one of the biggest knocks on nouns, or I guess there's not a ton. So we're looking at the sales now. There's been about 20 sales today, so not great. But if you want your ETH back, you should have at least a shot to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not super liquid market. It's somewhat unique model that I could potentially see some of these projects that are trying to figure out new ways to do drops. Like, what if they just once every 5 minutes we released one of these, or you released 5 of them? It's something that used to happen when drops were on like OpenSea, where you would release a few at a time, and it was just like a free for all. So that side of it, I could see like other new projects potentially pivoting towards. But this is a cool one, something that keep track of. Just watching in general mostly, but another one that holding up above 1 ETH floor in this market, like pretty decent. The next thing we wanted to talk about was kind of alluded to a little earlier, the AI stuff, but the Kevin Rose made an announcement about Moonbirds. So this was originally called AI Moonbirds, and then it ran up to about 0.25 floor yesterday. Kevin Rose put out the statement today, and it crashed that floor, but basically saying we're seeing more Moonbirds titled collections on OpenSea, and he's planning to remove those out of confusion. They do love the inspired art of these projects, but they don't want them using Moonbirds as a name. So, what's your thoughts here? Because I think I agree with him in a lot of ways. It crushed the floor of the AI Moonbirds one, and I think a lot of Moonbirds holders actually liked the art and were grabbing their own version of their Moonbird as the AI Moonbird yesterday. So this has now been changed to AI Nightbirds to show as like a different name. So what's your thoughts here on what Kevin Rose had to say about these?
I'm okay with it. So I think all the reactions immediately were like very negative.
Yeah.
And we see it even in the comments, right? Thread guys call him ridiculous. Farouk, of course, who doesn't live in a glass house of any kind, is telling Ryan Carson to log out. But I'm reading Joner's comment right now, and I actually agree with this quite a bit. He's trying to protect the brand and didn't DMCA them. They're now the Nightbirds with the same floor. Nobody got hurt. I totally agree with that. Like, he's trying to build a brand.
Click the wrong. Yeah, that people will click these fake collections. A lot of them are fake that he's talking about.
Right. So I totally understand. Protecting the IP, protecting the brand name of Moonbirds. He didn't like they said, he didn't DMCA. He didn't make AI Moonbirds get taken down from OpenSea. They literally just changed the name. And guess what? The floor price is right back to 0.2, which is where it was this morning before he tweeted. So literally no AI Moonbirds owners were hurt in this process unless they panic sold the bottom. And that was on them. And if that's the case, then guess what? They didn't really like the art that much anyway. They just wanted some potential future upside in the collection. So I'm okay with it. it's not Moonbirds is not a CCO project. There's a difference
Mhm.
between
Right.
CCO and non-CCO, and this is what he's trying to do. But kind of back to AI and Nightbirds, I will like on a positive note. I love the art on these, and to your point, like I was starting to look through the collection. Point two is a little high just to buy AI generated artwork that's a derivative. But if these dip, or if I can find the ones that kind of match my Moonbirds, I'll definitely be in the market. I like these quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought these were cool. I bought a few yesterday. I also saw a lot of moonbirds that they were going in and saying, "I want to buy the one that's mine and just hold it." It's at that point in time it was a low entry. They were a lot more interested in buying them when it was 0.05 than when it got above. I saw some people that were like, "Well, mine is 0.3. I'm not going to buy that." So I do think their upside is pretty limited
Mhm.
because part of that upside is the demand of the current holders. And I don't think this was created in the same way that like people are shilling numbers that are ENS to like the board ape holders. I don't think it's exactly the same. I think this has started another wave of this sort of AI version of projects. Goblins, as I mentioned earlier, are having one that are coming out soon. I believe goblins are CCO. I don't think they care what you guys do with anything, just in general. But yeah, these have been up and down all over the place. Like I think I'm not trying to buy into them anymore at this point. That tweet definitely hurt a lot of the momentum to it. And I think there are people that won't buy in just because of that at this point. Now they're nightbirds, that whole thing. But I think they look cool. Like if you zoom in on some of them, they have decently cool like detail in the images. Like this hat
Yeah,
is that's
I
like
love this
an
hat.
eclipse,
Yeah.
and on the bottom part there's like mountains, and it is pretty cool setup to it. Um, a little more unique of like a derivative project versus let's
Mhm.
just flip them left, you know. So I've looked at a lot of these and thought they were cool. But like I said, like as an investment, as far as like upside goes, probably not all that high of an upside. But I
Yeah.
think if I had a moonbird and I saw one of these that matched mine and it was at floor, like I'd consider doing that. I still have some of the derivatives that I got made for me when I had my board ape. Like I
Mhm.
still hold those, and I do like the idea of people sending them to you if they make a derivative of your item. But who knows? One thing that this is saying here is there's precedents with impermanent digital. He wouldn't be surprised if the AI moonbirds are from the same people. So this is something that, in general, right now, with all these derivative projects coming up, to me, I think a lot of them are the same people that are just pumping them out, especially
Mhm.
with the free ones, because you're not making too much with these free projects, but you basically can pump them all out. One of them hits a good amount of secondary volume, and that's where you like actually make it. If you send 10 of these out, oh, they're all free mints, they're more likely to sell out.
Right.
That seems like the current strategy. Do you think these are all coming from the same people?
Most likely, right? I've always felt like there's just a few groups behind the scenes who are pumping out the majority of these projects, and clearly they've got the operations down to a science. And I bet it takes them less than 6 hours to build some of these sets. And DeKins's is in the comments here talking about with an AI algorithm,
Yeah.
it's just easy as Photoshop, and that's I think
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why I don't love AI generated art is because of just how once you've got the algorithm set, right now you've got unlimited potential output, from the AI algorithm. So it kind of hurts the scarcity factor. But yeah, it definitely feels like these are coming from the same shops. You let's say you make 5 ETH per project on average. I mean, that's 10,000. If you could do 10 of these a week, that's a good week,
Yeah.
right? So they're going to continue to do it, um, as long as folks are minting and buying, and that's what the market's buying right now. It's not going to last forever. we've seen how these cycles run. We're in this part of the cycle right now where
Mhm.
all the free mints, more of the low end stuff, is what's catching attention.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to talk about was we left Monday's show with sort of a question: is Art Blocks back? And we had I don't really want to say two sides of the spectrum here, but basically both of the art block mints are above what they minted at, I believe. The Horo one, I'm not sure if that's how you're supposed to say it. This one, I mean, this went from what 0.15, 0.2 or so was where it ended
Yep.
at auction, and then it got up to, I remember seeing 1.7 of a floor, and then that other one, the Tabor one, is still sitting slightly above the floor plus gas at the end. So, what's your thoughts on these art blocks? Because I know you were getting into these this week and had the thought that potentially art blocks are back.
Yeah, so I've been starting to pay a lot more attention, and admittedly, so I was deep in art blocks summer 2021.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was my primary trade. I started getting into it last spring. Admittedly, I kind of fell off, stopped tracking as much during PFP mania, just because there wasn't a whole lot of market movement.
Yeah.
And I'm still approaching a lot of this from a trading perspective. But I started seeing the whispers, the chatter on Twitter, Discord from real folks who were talking about more attention on these art blocks projects. So I minted Horo. I only got one of these, and then it really took off. I mean, like to your point, it was over a 10x for at least for a few hours there. For anyone who minted, anyone who's held still, it's still a 5 or 6x from the min price. So this one was a huge win. The artist behind Horo, I think, had gained a bit of a cult following from FX Hash over on Tezos.
Yeah.
So that's an important factor to start considering for those who want to get into this market and start doing some due diligence and research, trying to identify more potential crossovers from FX Hash is likely a sharp play. But seeing this action on Factory made me think, okay, well, the curated could go gangbusters on Wednesday. And I did a decent amount of research looking into Tabor Roback, the artist, his background. I mean, this guy seems as credentialed as any of the generative artists that I've really followed. He's had his work featured in the Met, several other major museums. He's taught lectures on art and different art styles at NYU. And I want to say one other university I'm forgetting offhand. He's got some real success, years of experience coming to this Met. And then it was one where I think there was really no hype on Wednesday for this project. Maybe it was just the macro conditions. No one was talking about it. It ended up going down to, I didn't catch the exact bottom, but between 0.2 and 0.3 is where a majority of the mints ended up going. So it's sitting at 0.419 right now. It's above mint. So everyone who minted is still profitable. But one thing to warn everyone is there's not much liquidity in these collections just yet. And like Horo was super liquid for the first 8 hours, and then it fell off a cliff. And we've kind of seen similar with Color Space. We got that run right out of the gate, which you would expect. And now, in the last, we've seen some decent buys. So there's a ton of buys about 6 hours ago. It looks like some kind of a sweep. But then we've had, 5 buys in the last 5 hours. So that's just understand, this isn't Goblin Town from a daily volume perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one important thing with the art blocks is, yes, there's only 600 of these and over half of the owners, but it's just the type of thing where I think on Monday, Dickenses was saying that still image of it is kind of meh. And I think that's a little issue that happens with these generative art ones is like, what's the still image of it going to be? Because a lot of people do like to just sort of scroll through and be like, oh, that one catches my eye. And it's not as easy with that one for the color space version. And so I think that was part of it. It was also like like you said, like I wasn't really hearing people talking about it, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, they've minted 400 of these, and I was like, oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. Because they're usually on Mondays at the same exact time. Like it was kind of weird. They did it on a Wednesday this time, so I wasn't even like thinking of it because in my head it's not a Monday. Our box security it's always on Mondays, so that was
I
kind of
think
it
you
from me. But
Yeah, I think you nailed it. So like I've watched quite a few of these. So these are animated pieces. It's a lot of ways similar to like an old screensaver type uh, animation style. But we talked about this on Monday. Like it didn't really feel like it passed the wall test. Like I think the art is cool and I get his style. But to your point, a lot of people want to look at those thumbnails or like those initial images, whatever we want to call them. And like these don't, if you don't understand kind of like what's going on behind the scenes, or you have to actually even click into these to buy them, they're like, you know, I don't really understand what's going on here. So
yeah,
it was an easy pass. That, and we never really saw any big high end action.
yeah.
I think there's a few sales in the threes, maybe four, but I haven't really seen anything above five. So without that, there just hasn't been a whole lot of attention.
Yeah. So definitely something to just keep your eye on in general on these art blocks that are coming out. If they continue to trend towards this, we were at a point where a lot of these weren't even selling out. So at least we've gotten back to the point where they're starting to sell out again. They and holding above mint price could be sort of a trigger that, hey, uh, the right people are buying back into these versus the people that saw this was a quick way to make a buck and then they're just like dumping them after 5 minutes after or whatever. So that's sort of the idea that I've been watching from is like, okay, they're starting to sell out now again. Okay, are they holding above floor price again? Okay, so before I consider art blocks back, I want to see a few of these play out that way. So yeah, we'll be watching for them in the future on how that's going to be. Not sure if they're doing one next week with the holiday there, um,
No.
but whenever the next one is, we'll make sure to talk to you guys about that one and prep you, see who the artist is, like how many there's going to be, like all that sort of detail, like we normally do on Mondays. We will not be back until Thursday with the Monday holiday there. We're going to take Monday off, but hopefully a week from now we have a lot more stuff to talk about. Hopefully by then we'll have a wrecked guy reveal to sort of go through. And if any other projects come out and stuff, it'll be, I think, let's see, like a week from now is still what, 2 weeks before NFT NYC. So I think a lot of teams are going to start prepping for that. We started creating somewhat of like a calendar of events for people on luckytrader.com that we're going to have out there for you. So you can sort of pick and choose, see where the projects you hold are going to be having events through that NFT NYC week. That's obviously almost a month from now, but less than a month at this point, that week of like the 20th. So keep an eye out for that. And besides that, have a good weekend. Have a good long weekend. Hopefully, if you have one of these goblins, they continue to run and be the center of attention because I mean, I'd expect them to have another spaces tonight. Like they
Of
gotta just
course.
keep the spaces going because oh
Have to.
man, that was the most bullish part. There's 2,000 people in there, and every 10 minutes, like you just see a massive sweep. Like, oh, someone just bought 20 of them, and they had some people, well known influencer names that were dropping by and playing around with them, and it was a fun time. It was hard to like stay in there just ears wise, but um, it was fun, and at least they're keeping some fun in NFTs. So
At least we're having some fun in this terrible bear market.
yeah, so keep your head up out there. We will see you guys next week.